As a creative entrepreneur, it can feel isolating to go it alone. Imagine being surrounded by other accomplished creative colleagues eager to accelerate the growth of their business and personal brands. I'm Philip VanDusen, and I'm launching a membership community called Bonfire for creative pros like you, because I believe in the power of building a meaningful network. Bonfire is a hybrid coaching, training, networking, and accountability community, a place for us to share, grow, and ignite our potential together. Need more confidence about your next move? With our FIRE Milestone Success Map, you'll know what your next step should be and exactly how to get there. You get bi-weekly video sessions, private online community, a deep resource library, and exclusive access to yours truly and other amazing benefits. So come join Bonfire, a community of like-minded individuals who are as passionate as you. Visit philipvandusen.com/bonfire to learn more about the launch. Let's fuel your creative future.
Hey everybody, happy Halloween. I am wearing my bright orange Bonfire t-shirt in celebration of Halloween and pumpkins and all things purple and orange. How are you guys today? I am stoked to be here with you. Karen, good to see you. Daniel, good to see you too. Hassani, welcome. I'd love to know where everyone is from, maybe even how long you've been in the industry. That's super helpful for me in terms of kind of gauging how I talk about this subject. And if you haven't connected with me on social, please do so. Subscribe to my newsletter. There's a URL right there, philipvandusen.com/muse. All my other social channels, etc., especially LinkedIn. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do that. And Judy, good to see you from Lambertville. Yes, Lambertville, New Jersey, at home in the house. Liz is here. Christina's here. Cool. So just a couple other things to get out of the way. If you are watching on Facebook, you want to go to ecam.live, then this weird URL, and sign up, because if the person who just said, "Hey, Philip, good to see you again," you show up to me as anonymous Facebook user, no URL, no name, no nothing. So if you go and register with ecam.live, then I can see who you are, which will be very helpful to me. And you only have to do it once. So because eCam needs permission from Facebook to show us your avatar and name. It's this whole tech hurdle that they make us jump over. But so go to ecam.live/2B66D3 and register, and then I can see who you are. Please do that. And again, it's awesome that you're joining from the Brand Design Masters Facebook group, but I'd love to know who you are. Claudia's here from the UK. Christina's from Romania, living in Amsterdam. That's cool. Go Dutch. Colorado. Cool. All right. Let's get a couple other things out of the way. First of all, I have launched Bonfire. You saw that little kind of bumper ad at the beginning of the live stream. Bonfire is launched. If you go to philipvandusen.com/bonfire, you can join. It is a mastermind community for established creative professionals, and it is awesome. And the people who are in it are really digging it. There's a few people here who are in chat who are in it, and I'm stoked to have them here. And it just shows the dedication that they have to their craft and their career, that they're showing up here as well as in Bonfire. So if you don't know about Bonfire, you should definitely go check it out. Go to this page, philipvandusen.com/bonfire, read all about it, and you can join Bonfire right from that page. And so I'm going to turn that off. And then if you are in need of any Adobe training or want to kind of sharpen your Adobe skills, go to byol.me/Philip. It's an affiliate link. Yes, you don't pay any more. I get a little bump for referring you to Daniel. Daniel Scott's a certified Adobe trainer and a keynote speaker at Adobe Max fairly frequently, and a super nice guy and the best Adobe trainer out there. And his subscription to his website is like $12 a month. It is insane that value. And you get access to his entire library of Adobe training for that subscription fee. So definitely go check out byol.me/Philip if you want to learn more about that. BYOL stands for Bring Your Own Laptop. And Daniel Scott is an awesome guy and a good friend. Liz says Bonfire rocks, which is awesome. Great to have you here, Liz. Good to see you. Prosper is from New York City. Francisco is here. Cool. Leah Greif. See, Leah, I got that right? And so, all right. Now, the other thing is that I do coaching. So if you are actually looking for more kind of personal one-on-one attention and coaching in your creative professional career or entrepreneurial career, I do that one-on-one. If you go to this URL, philipvandusen.com/one-on-one, you can learn more about how I do coaching and actually sign up for sessions right there. So definitely check that out. If you're looking for more personal attention, and if you're at a pivot point in your career, you've just been promoted to creative director or want to be promoted to creative director and need some guidance through that. So we can definitely help you there. And all right, so Cyprian is here too. Another Bonfire member. That's so cool. Mexico City. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to talk about creative briefs today. And I want to just be really honest with you guys about this. And many of you know that I was not trained as a graphic designer. I do not have a degree in graphic design. I have a master's degree in painting, and I learned everything that I know on the job. I started off my career in the fashion industry. I started my own t-shirt company back when that wasn't very common. And then I made a move into the fashion industry, working through some licensing companies and then also at Old Navy, and worked my way up through Old Navy till for about 11 years. And because I had no training in graphic design, and because I came up through the fashion industry where they don't really use creative briefs on the product side of the street anyway, I was probably, I want to say I was 45 years old before I ever came across my first creative brief. I can't believe it when I even say that, but it's true. I didn't know about creative briefs at all until that period of time. And that's when I left Old Navy and went over to the agency side, started doing brand strategy and brand identity and consumer packaged goods and all that sort of stuff. And I learned very quickly about what creative briefs were and what they do and what they're used for. And so if you have never used a creative brief, don't sweat it right now. But that's what we're here for today, because I want to share with you what a creative brief is and what it does and why they are so important and why it would really behoove you as a working in-house in an agency, in-house at a corporation, at an agency, as a freelancer, how beneficial using a creative brief can be for you and your business and your clients and the success of the projects that you work on. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, let's jump into it. Let's get rid of that. Let's go to here. And again, Bonfire, if you haven't checked it out yet, go to philipvandusen.com/bonfire. We're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But we're going to talk about how to write a creative brief and what a creative brief is and how you can use it. In the chat, how many people here have actually used a creative brief? That's what I want to know. Give me a yes or a no. If you have used one, or if you know what they are and have used them, or if you don't and are curious, I'd like to know kind of like where we stand. So what is a creative brief? First of all, what a creative brief is, what's it look like? Generally, creative brief looks like a 1 to 15, sometimes if it's a big company, 20-page document that is essentially the blueprint. Victoria says no. Hassani says no. There's some yeses and nos. Okay, guess what? Judy says we'll see whether we've used one or not. So they are essentially the blueprint for any kind of creative project that a company works with an agency on. And they are used for both the agency and the company, the client company. And in general, creative briefs are usually, in the agency world anyway, created by the client and then delivered to the agency for either a request for a proposal, an RFP, or to get a quote, a bid on a project. They give the creative brief to the agency, and it describes what the project is, what the deliverables are, etc. And it is essentially, it outlines kind of the reason why the project is going to exist and what's going to be done within it. And I want you to stay with me till the end, because I'm going to offer you a very reasonable product that is a single-page creative brief format that I developed in my years in the agency, which can be super, super helpful for individual freelancers and contributors, because it simplifies a creative brief process and boils it down to a way that's really, really manageable and easy to understand, and your clients, it's digestible by your clients. And I'm going to share that with you at the end. And so, what is it? What's in it for you? Why should you even do this thing, right? Creative briefs, what they do is you go through a discovery call with your client, right? And you, when you're starting off a project, you get on the phone or Zoom with them and you ask them a whole lot of questions about what the deliverable is and the timeline and all the sorts of stuff, right? And you may do a deeper discovery call about their business. But what a creative brief does is it provides some real structure to that information, and it provides clarity on the project description. And it helps you ultimately, the reason why you want to do it is because it helps you deliver effective work that actually delivers on the ROI, the return on investment that the client wants to get from the project. And it removes one of the biggest aspects of it, and one of the most powerful aspects of a creative brief is that it takes the subjectivity out of a design project. When you're delivering creative work, a lot of the times, if you're just delivering it and describing it and it's living on aesthetic terms, then the client reacts to it through its aesthetics. And so when you are judging creative purely and only on aesthetics, it becomes a beauty contest, meaning the client and what they like or the aesthetic that they want is really their opinion of the aesthetics is how the whole project is judged. But when you bring a creative brief into the process and you dial it up into strategy and business needs and a higher level of thinking, it takes the subjectivity out of the process, or at least pushes it way, way back in terms of the decision-making criteria that you use to judge the success or failure of a project and what creative you actually end up choosing. Over time, so it takes that subjectivity, it takes that beauty contest piece out of it, and it actually puts a lot more power back in your hands as the creative to drive the process and drive the decision-making process around a project. And it saves you ultimately, because it will save you rounds of revisions, it will save you miscommunication, it will save you time and misdirected effort in every single project that you work on. And if you're an individual freelancer or you work at a really small agency, a lot of times the smaller SMB, small to medium-sized business clients that you may be working with are entrepreneurs or startups. They won't be delivering a creative brief to you. They'll be looking to you to develop that. And so when the creative agency or the freelancer scales down and the engagement scales down, it actually ends up on your plate to develop and would behoove you to develop a creative brief. But what it does is it ensures that both the designer and the client are on the same page all the time and discussing the project at the same level across the same criteria all at the same time. And so the goals of it are, what are the goals? The goals of writing a great creative brief is that you want to capture all of the relevant details and the strategy around a project. It forces you to think through and ask all of the appropriate questions and gather all of that appropriate information from the client through defining these projects' parameters and the objectives of it. And so both sides will align on everything before the work starts, which also can save you a lot of time and effort. And it ensures ultimately that the deliverables of the project are going to meet expectations, and it's also going to meet the business needs. It makes the process smoother. It makes it more efficient. It takes the friction out of it a lot of times. It saves, as I said, time, and time is money. And an on-target brief or a clear creative brief means that the creative that comes out of the project, is also going to be on target. And so when does it get written? When do you write a creative brief? As I said, historically, the larger agencies, larger clients, it's written by the client side. But there is kind of a long-standing joke, and I'm sure that the people in chat here who have used creative briefs before know this joke, which is that any brief that comes in from the client is usually bad. Like the bad creative brief is a trope that lives on in the agency world and is the nightmare of every agency person, is you get crappy briefs from your clients because they are either incomplete or badly articulated, or they miss huge swaths of information that you need to have, or they're not very clear or directional. And so it's kind of an ongoing joke with agencies about the brief. And the idea is that when you get the brief in from the client, you always need to kind of have a back and forth with the client. You need to consider the brief, ask your questions, build in things that you're missing or not understanding, and it becomes a collaborative process of developing the creative brief. Many times, companies and agencies will go through many versions of a creative brief as it's getting developed, and it may even go through multiple hands across multiple stakeholders, different levels of the company and the agency, etc. But ultimately, I have to say this, and you got to understand that it's worth all of the time and effort and the headache that it takes to do this stuff up front. And that will become abundantly clear when we kind of get into like what the results of using a creative brief are. Okay? You guys tracking with me? All right, cool. All right. So when do you use it? Oops. When do you use it? You use a creative brief before the project starts. So it is a preliminary exercise that goes into a project, but it's the very earliest stages of a project before it starts, before any work is started. And it's also used in every single creative presentation as the project goes along. This is a recommendation that I have for you, and something that I've built in my own experience over time, is that building a great creative brief, a rock-solid, bulletproof creative brief, is a tool that you can use to keep a project on track at every stage of the game. And it also gives you a tool to use as the measuring stick, as the metric judgment post that you will use in every single meeting that you have with a client. So I find it very helpful to review the brief, even if it's just 5 minutes of time, to review the brief, reconfirm that it's always the information in it is accurate before every creative presentation, because then when you present the creative, you are presenting it through the lens of the brief, and all the feedback that you get back, it has to be delivered through that filter of the brief, and you will judge it on whether the feedback is meeting the brief or not, right? So it becomes this wonderful tool that kind of keeps it's like a cattle chute, right? If you have a herd of cattle and you let them out on the field, they just run all over the place, right? But when you're trying to get 500 head of cattle through one particular opening in a fence, you have to use a cattle chute, which is or border collies, and you funnel the cattle essentially like a funnel through this opening at a fence. And that's essentially what a creative brief is. That's what it does. It acts like a cattle chute. It kind of keeps everybody on track and pushes them through the same result, and is a great way to keep projects on track. And so let's talk about the kind of 10 key parts of a creative brief. Okay, there are 10 key parts. And when we get to the end of this, I'm going to share with you this one-page creative brief format that I've developed. And it makes kind of capturing these 10 pieces and understanding how they fit together in terms of hierarchy and priority. It makes it really easy. And one of the things about creative briefs that I've been a VP of design, executive creative director at big agencies, and you get 15-page creative briefs from a client, and then you work with the client to kind of tighten them up and make them better. And then you've got this 15-page creative brief that you have to then go and take and communicate to your designers, right? And a lot of times designers, they can't parse all of this vast amount of information that's in a 15-page document, right? They just want to get to what do I have to deliver? And so that's why I developed the one-page creative brief, because it boils all this vast amount of information down into a single document that's really easy to kind of get your head around. And I'm going to share that with you a little later. So let me get a little drink here. So number one, the first thing you want to do is you want to describe the business and the business strategy and the brand. So that gets captured in the brief. If you're working for a huge company like P&G, right, and you're working on a creative brief, the brand in the creative brief probably won't be P&G. It might be one of P&G's brands like Febreze or Tide, right? And so the brand might actually be a product brand, okay? And you want to capture kind of the context, so the background information of the company and or the product. What is it? Is it a new product? Is it an existing product? What's the market? Where is this product going to be sold? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be in physical retail? Is it a product update? Is it fixing an aspect of a product that's kind of broken or not performing? It could be a service too. So it could be a product or a service. And you want to capture kind of what those products and services are that are owned or part of the brand that is being addressed in the brief, right? And so you also are capturing the business goals of the project, as well as the brand perception. So how is the brand or the product or the service being perceived today in the marketplace? What's the current status of the brand? What's its name? What's its reason for being? And where does it stand right now in the world? What's the business strategy around it? The second thing that you want to capture is to summarize the project deliverables, right? What are the deliverables? What are you actually going to be delivering? Is it a package? Is it a website? Is it a new corporate identity? Is it a bunch of, Facebook ads? Is it a video? You have to get really clear about what is the actual deliverable that is part of the project. And this is one of those things that is captured on the brief. One of the things I also just want to kind of do a sidebar and mention again about when you're using a brief to go through it at the beginning of every creative presentation, one of the reasons why that's really valuable is because oftentimes, especially in big companies, things change, right? A project may be going on for months and months, and then halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, something around the marketing changes or something around the product line changes. And being able to stop and pause and decide on whether this is going to affect this particular project, it's always good to kind of find that out before you get to the end of a project and find it derailed because of something that went on in the company or with the brand that no one happened to tell you about, right? And so number 2, you're summarizing the project deliverables. Number 3 is you are talking about the objective. So what must the creative actually achieve? What is the problem that it is solving? How are you going to measure the success of this? So, for instance, if you're launching an ebook, right? So the measure of success around an ebook might be sales, might be the success or the number of downloads of the book on Amazon. If it's a packaging project and you're developing a new packaging for an existing product, it might be the sales lift that comes from the newness of how that product's being displayed on the shelf. It helps the designers, and by capturing this, it helps the designers who are going to be doing the work understand the goals of what it is they're trying to accomplish with the work. It helps the designer understand the target, the solutions. What are the target of those solutions? Meaning, what is the customer reaction that they are trying to achieve through the design of this project? What is the ultimate project objective? Number 4 is defining the customer. And you guys know this also as the customer avatar. It's a different way of saying it. But who's the customer? You want to kind of get really granular with this and talk about, male, female, age, demographics, income, as well as behavioral insights. So lifestyle insights or motivational factors. What are the buying triggers that these people have? What is the problem that they have that they want to have solved by this particular thing? Could be also their barriers to purchase. What are the things? Is it, the price that's a barrier to this particular avatar? Is it the timing of the year that it comes out? Is it convenience that drives the purchase behavior? What is the customer avatar? And also what we like to call the need state. So where is their need and what is the state of that need? Meaning, what is it that's going to drive that purchase or that interaction or that engagement behavior? You capture that in the brief as well. Number 5 is you want to define the communication. And the communication is kind of a broad term, but it operates on a number of different levels. This could be the product or the service information. So the actual, what is the name of the product? What is that? Let's take a packaged product, for instance. So let's say it's a soup, right? So you have a brand name of the soup, and then you have the flavor of the soup, and then you have some special ingredient aspect of it. Maybe it's low salt, right? And then you have the size of the soup, and then you have maybe the family of soup products that it's in. Maybe it's, you got to add water. It's a condensed soup, right? So capturing all of that product information is part of the communication. Also, the communication has to be, what are the benefits? What are the benefits that are going to be to this consumer or this customer avatar? Both the functional benefits, it makes me full, right? So I'm not hungry anymore, or the emotional benefits. It makes me feel all warm and cozy and I'm happy that my family is well fed. You want to think about the communication or the information around what we call POPs, which is points of parity. What is it that this product does that it has to do in order to even exist in its category? It has to be at parity with its other brands that it's competing with. And then also your PODs, which is points of differentiation. How does this product or service differentiate or is better or different from its competition as well? In communication, you're also dealing with communication hierarchy. And let's talk about the soup example again. So you might have the brand, Campbell Soup, and then you have the product category, it's condensed soup. And then you have the flavor, it's tomato. And then it's low salt, and then it's usage. And so all of these things have to be communicated on this package, right? But what's the hierarchy of how they need to be communicated? What's the most important thing? Second most important, third most important, fourth most important? In packaging, there's sometimes 5, 6, 8 different levels of communication hierarchy. The same thing happens on websites. The same thing happens in a lot of product and services. So what do you need to communicate? And what is the hierarchy of that communication? What is the most important, second most important? This is one of those things that getting alignment with the client when you're developing a creative brief is really, really time It saves a lot of time and headache and pain, right? There's nothing like designing something and then finding out that, the communication hierarchy, your impression of it or their impression of what they wanted was very different from what yours is. Getting them to actually say, okay, this is number 1, this is 2, 3, 4, it helps you do the design in a much more targeted way. Another piece of communication that you have to think about is copywriting. So what is the copywriting? What's the tone of voice? What are you actually communicating? What's the content that's going into it? In the case of ebooks or in case of websites where there's a lot of written content, communication hierarchy is really important, but also the amount of communication, what all the aspects of the communication are, have to be part of the brief. Okay, you guys tracking with me? What's the USP? The USP is the unique selling proposition. A unique selling proposition it's a very good question, by the way, part worker. Unique selling proposition is how you are communicating the benefits of a product or service and how it's unique and better than its competition. That's what a unique selling proposition is, or a USP. All right, now we're going to talk about number 6 is you want to talk about the competitive landscape. And the competitive landscape is one of those things that you want to address in any project. And this is one of those things that clients many times forget about or don't kind of put the amount of weight or importance on it that should be. And I find this very, very common with small to medium-sized businesses, is that they may not have thought about or really looked at who their competition is, or they may think we're totally different and we have no competition, which is all BS, right? Everybody has competition, absolutely everybody. And if they don't know who it is, this actually gives you a really great opportunity to upsell them to do a competitive audit or some sort of review of their competition to help them get a better handle on who their competition is. But in the form of the creative brief, capturing what the competitive landscape is, at least at a very high level, is also an important thing to do. What does the market look like? What does the industry look like? What does the category or that space look like? What are the conditions that are influencing that industry or that product or that service category? What are the trends, both from macro trends, societal trends, to micro trends? Could be socioeconomic trends. These are all competitive landscape parameters that you want to discuss and align on. So as you're judging the creative work, you and the client are coming from the same place in understanding what you're up against, right? What are you developing? How are you going to develop this piece of creative project? How is it going to perform better than the competition? Unless you capture what the competition is, what they're doing, and how they're doing it, you don't know whether you're better or different. You're operating and throwing something out into the business universe in a black box, right? Everything has to be put into context. And that's one of those things that you capture in the brief. The next thing you want to capture are visual anchors or analogs. And these are kind of actually two different things. Analogs are brand analogs or design analogs. Many times when you're working with a client, they may say, okay, we're developing this packaged product and our competition is X and Y, and they're already on the shelf and we are going to be going onto the shelf and we're sitting right next to them. Could be a store. They're going to be in this strip mall and it's going to be next to these 3 other stores, right? What is the context? And looking at who the competition is and what they look like, and if there is any brand or thing that they're looking at that they want to be like, right? Or they want to look like, or they know that they are inspired by this particular design aesthetic or this particular brand. You want to capture what those brand analogs are, what those pieces of inspiration are. And then when you get into visual anchors, what I call visual anchors, you can also call them directional mood boards, right? Generally, these are kind of added creative brief, or early on, very, very early on in the creative project, where you're actually not designing the thing yet, but you're just getting some creative direction and capturing that. So taking the step of doing these visual brand analogs and then adding in some visual mood boards, visual direction to help ground the creative development in some sort of early state so you can get some alignment with the client around that. Another thing around analogs or visual anchors that you have to take into consideration in a brief are there any kind of past products, past services, past campaigns, related products that have to be taken into consideration when you're developing your creative. So let's take the soup example. For instance, Campbell's is developing a brand new soup. Campbell's already has 50 soups on the shelf, right? So they've got some brand equity. They have some context that this product's going to have to sit within, right? Or, you're developing a laundry detergent and it's going on the shelf in the laundry aisle, and you have to develop this product that's going to sit amongst all the blue, Gain jugs and all the orange Tide jugs, and it's going to have to sit in there. So the context of where the product or service is entering is important. And I'm using kind of retail examples because it's a very easy kind of example to visualize. But this can also happen in any kind of product or service when you're thinking about what are the aesthetics within that category and how are we going to compete, or how are we going to look in terms of that category. Okay? Number 8 is capturing mandatories. Mandatories is also another crucial part of a creative brief, because are there any things that have to be on or in the creative output, right? So these are things like brand guidelines. So following the brand guidelines, the color palette, the logo, the font choices, all that sort of stuff. Are there any visual equities or, imagery that has been used historically, some historic aesthetic that the company has that you, in developing your piece of creative, are going to have to take into consideration and make sure that you are aligning with that aesthetic? Are there any names? Is there any naming nomenclature? Are there any things that exist already or have existed in promotional materials or historically online that the project that you're doing is going to have to sit within that context or take that context into consideration? So you want to think about and ask the question of your client, are there any mandatories that we actually have to do for this project? Or is it a white slate? Which is, it's very, very rare that you get that. The next thing, number 9, is defining the timing. This is an easy one. It's like, what's the calendar? What's the completion date? What does the overall flow chart of the creative process look like? What are the milestones? How many meetings there are there? How many creative reviews are there? How many stakeholders are there? Actually, stakeholders a little later. So how many revisions are they allowed? How many rounds are there going to be? So defining the timing of the project is one of those things that you capture in the brief. And finally, number 10 is the stakeholders. And this is capturing the contact information of everybody who's going to be part of this project. There's nothing like doing a creative project and then finding out at the end that, yes, you worked so hard to get it past this director of this product line. And then they're going, oh, okay, now we got to take it to the VP. And then after that, we got to take it to the CMO. You want to get all that information up front. Like, what is the hierarchy of the decision-making matrix around this project? So you know what it is going into it, right? You know that you're going to have to go through these multiple levels or multiple hoops and capture who all the stakeholders are in this project. Now, finally, let's talk about how you use it. You use a creative brief, as I said, to kick off after you've done it, right? You've captured it, you've created it. You've signed off on it, your client signed off on it. You use it in every single meeting that you have, meaning you take 5 minutes and you say, let's review the brief. And you pull the brief out and they're going, oh, not this again, right? But let me tell you, it's worth it that you kick off every meeting, every critique with a very high level review of the brief. Because then when you get into presenting the creative, the brief's fresh in your mind, and you can present the creative through the strategic positioning of the brief itself. Now, briefs can also change, right? Like I said, something in the business could have changed mid-project. And so reviewing the brief mid-project can also be very helpful, because if something's changed, you want to capture it in the brief, because they do change sometimes. All of this information, the brief grounds all of the feedback and all of the decisions around any project in the core tenets of the brief, these core 10 things that we've walked through and that are part of the brief. It puts this whole project and all the judgment of the project into an objective state. It takes it away from subjective opinions. I like purple. My wife doesn't like, things that look like lizards, random stuff. You've heard it, right, in a creative presentation before. Right. It takes all of the subjectivity of the judgment of the creative product out of the equation and grounds it all in subjective criteria, which is the stuff that's in the brief. Because at the beginning, you say to the client, we're going to capture everything that we're going to use to judge, to develop this project and to judge the project. And then you use it in every single stage of the game to judge the product of what you're delivering to the client. So that is that. Now, there's two kind of formats of briefs I want to show you. Actually three, and I'm not showing the first one. The first one is like a Word document that's 20 pages long, right? It's just like wall of text, right? That's what you usually get from big clients. I developed a 2-page brief, which is kind of compartmentalized into kind of subsections, which is easier to view and easier for clients to kind of type into. But then what I developed, which I think is really powerful, and I blurred it out on purpose, is a single-page creative brief format, and it contains all of the information and all of the subject sections that I just described to you in this single-page document, and it does it in a way that's really intuitive to look at and see how all of these things build on each other or are related to each other. And I am actually offering this up as a download, and it's you can actually get this one-page creative brief format, and I deliver it in both editable Keynote, and also editable PowerPoint format. And it's $20. You get the download with the two formats in it, and you also get a description of how to use it. And there's actually an example of a filled out one, actually in a project that was a real project that I did for Campbell's tomato soup, that shows you kind of aspects of how you fill it out. So it's a very reasonable price, and you can use it in your business like tomorrow. And it's a really, really intuitive format that I developed after my years and years in the industry, and seeing designers struggle with 15-page Word documents trying to figure it out. And so I've developed this format. If you go to philipvandusen.com/creative brief, it will lead you to this page where you can download it. It's a really great cool little tool, and I think that you'd really benefit from it. And so just talking about Bonfire just very quickly, Bonfire is this community that I've started, and it's just a couple weeks old, and it's a mastermind group for established creative professionals who are networking and sharing goals and holding each other accountable to those goals and helping each other grow and move forward faster. It's not a free group. It's actually $97 a month. It's a subscription, but everybody who's in there has invested to be there. And because they have invested to be there, they are working it. They're serious about it, and they're there for a reason, to get better faster. And when you're surrounded with other people who are working and investing in their growth and their development, you cannot help but catch on fire, which is why I've called it Bonfire. Because when you're surrounded with people who are on fire and moving forward and driven and motivated, it is infectious. And I have seen it time and again, and it's already happening inside Bonfire, and I'm super stoked. There's a lot of people here actually in the chat right now who are in Bonfire, and I'm sure they can weigh in and tell you how awesome it is, because it is totally awesome. And we meet, actually there are 4 meetings a month. There are 2 mastermind sessions a month, and there's 2 just open office hour kind of coffee chat kind of Zoom meetings. And the 2 mastermind sessions are very kind of formulaic, and they go through a process of hot seats and goals and setting accountability and giving feedback to each other and helping each other grow. We do it on Zoom, so it's super, super accessible. What's included is group mentorship from me, 2 times a month Zoom calls. All of these Zoom calls, the masterminds anyway, are recorded and available. If for any reason you can't make one, you can catch it on a recording. There's a private gated online community on the Circle platform, which is super awesome. And because it's on Circle, there's also a mobile app, so you can actually access Bonfire on the go on your mobile device. You'll get feedback and accountability from your partners and peers who are inside of the group. I've also developed a resource library that's built around a concept called the FIRE milestones. And it's a 4-step milestone success path. And there are over, I think, almost 70 downloadable resources that are worksheets and templates and toolkits and watch lists and resource recommendations that are strategy tools that are downloadable, ready to go the second you join. It's all in there. It's actually, I'm told by some people, it's a little overwhelming that there's so much stuff in there that's of super high value that you can use immediately in your business. And then, as I said, I have some open office hours. You also get discounted access to Brand Strategy 101, which is my signature brand strategy course. And because you're in Bonfire, as you work through that course, if you have questions or need help instituting that work into your business, I'm there to help you. I'm there to help you figure it out. And then we're also going to have visiting experts who are going to come in periodically. This is just a little kind of a peek at what the aesthetic of it is inside the group and some of the documents. Tons of tools and strategy tools and downloads, as I said. And again, it's on the Circle platform, available on the desktop, available on mobile. It's got forums and events and recordings, playlists, chat rooms, etc. It's a really, really cool and vibrant group, and it's growing. As I said, if you pay quarterly, it's $97 a month. There are higher levels, so there's a guild level, which is a higher level membership, and then there's also one-on-one coaching retainer with me, which is also available if you choose and want to work with me directly. So it's an insane value at $97 a month. And I encourage people to join quarterly. Number one, you get that value of the subscription fee, but also you're investing and putting a stake in the ground for a quarter at least, so you can get in there and really work it and develop relationships and move forward faster with your business. And so if you go to philipvandusen.com/bonfire, and you can read all about it. There's a couple videos on that page. Oh, and by the way, just this week, I actually added, I think there's 10 testimonial videos of people who have been through masterminds of mine on that page at the bottom, underneath their frequently asked questions section. There's 10 videos of people who are talking about their experiences inside the guild, which was a series of 4 masterminds that I ran previous to Bonfire coming to life. And they talk about how it's impacted their business and what an incredible experience that was, and how it's affected them and their business and their future and their earning power and their relationships and the meaningful network that they have, friendships, etc., that are pushing their professional boundaries. And so it's a really, really cool group. I encourage you to check it out. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to kind of scroll back and look through any questions that might have come up. If you have a question, please type question in all caps so I can see it. And I'll do a little AMA right now. You can ask me anything, If it's about creative briefs, that's super helpful. Okay, so we already answered the question about the unique selling proposition. Matthew asks, competitive landscape and trends versus core design fundamentals and best practice. If the two are at odds, which one wins out? I don't know that they're ever really completely at odds. One informs the other. The competitive landscape and what trends are happening in the competitive landscape will inform design and should inform design no matter what. Because no product, no service is entering into a blank landscape. Every product or service is in competition with somebody else and multiple people. Core design fundamentals and best practices are just that. They are core design fundamentals that you want to follow and make sure that your work is standing up to those. But I don't know that I've ever found that core design fundamentals and what's happening in competitive landscape are ever completely at odds with each other. And it's never one or the other. There's always a judgment call. That's how, in my opinion anyway, Matthew, it works. Okay. Lori asks, why is it only in PowerPoint and Keynote? Is it that you can share? Is it that how you share with clients? Yeah, the reason why I put it in PowerPoint and Keynote is, number one, I have always, when I built it originally a decade ago, I built it in Keynote. And then I exported it into PowerPoint and made sure that it's still read, because some people are on PCs or some people use PowerPoint. The reason why I put it in that is because when you're doing proposals, where you're communicating with clients, entering information into Keynote, into a format like that, is easier to share because a lot of clients want to have access to it, meaning when you're doing the creative brief, being able to share it in a way that clients can access it and type into it and change it, because it is a collaborative, right, document. So I find that 90% of clients are on PowerPoint and all the creatives are on Keynote, right? So to find some sort of a presentation format that's editable, that clients can also interact with, I find that that's the best way, because in this single page creative brief, it's a visual structure. So it's not a Word document. If you want to share documents back and forth and want to work in Word, you can do that with your client. But when it comes down to it, clients don't have Illustrator, they don't have Photoshop. You need to share it in a format that they can actually use and edit. So that's why I share it in those formats. So let me back up to that. Actually, if someone could type it up in chat, that'd be really easy, but it's philipvandusen.com/creative brief. That is the URL for the brief. And I will back up to it. Yeah, so here it is. philipvandusen.com/creative brief. And that will take you to my Kajabi store, where you can download that tool. And and it's an awesome tool. And if you have any other questions about anything, what are you going to be for Halloween? That's my question. That's my question for you. What are you going to be for Halloween today? Are you dressing up, or do you have kids? Are they dressing up? I'd like to know. Because on the East Coast of the United States here, the littlest kids are probably going to start wandering around the neighborhood in just about an hour and a half. And so I'm going to have to tie it up and get home and get all the candy in the basket and get ready for the little monsters to come. And I'm super psyched about that. I actually love giving out treats for Halloween, because just some of the costumes that kids have are just awesome, and they're just so excited, and they're, hyped up on sugar, and it's just a fun evening. So let's see this. Could you use Figma or Sketch for a creative brief? Generally, creative briefs are mostly information. It's not design. it's not a design exercise. It's not a design tool. It's an information tool. But the one pager that I worked out is the information builds in it in a visual way, but in a very simple visual way. It's on Keynote, it's on PowerPoint. So building and to a certain extent, my answer to the previous question, Lori's question, kind of relates to this, is that you want to build your creative brief or write your creative brief in a format, in an app that your clients can access and edit. So doing it in PowerPoint, doing it in Word, if you want to do it that way, if you can format a simple Word document, you can do it that way. But doing it in Figma or Sketch are not things that clients can use, so I would not recommend that. This is it's more of a strategy and project description document than it is any kind of creative document. Now, that said, you'll notice if you download the one-page creative brief that I'm sharing here, is that there are areas on that page for visuals, meaning as you develop mood boards or creative anchors, and the creative part of the project starts to kick off, and you're doing those mood boards to kind of ground the aesthetics of the project, I generally come back to the brief and put in visuals of those onto the brief. So the brief, to a certain extent, is a living document throughout the project. You're icing off 90% of it at the very beginning before you start anything. But then as you do those mood boards, you can inject them into the brief. Also, there's places on the brief for visual equities, meaning are there logos, colors, brand equities that have to be maintained, mandatories that are going to influence the design part of the project. And there's also a section for analogs or inspiration. So many times when you're doing a project, the client may say, our competition is X and they have this like amazing looking package, or I love the aesthetic that are in these, we're doing soup, but I love the aesthetic of these chocolates packages, or this other sort of, a completely out of category thing. We want to kind of have that aesthetic, and we think it addresses our market, our target, and the strategy for what we're trying to achieve. You put visuals of those on the brief. So it kind of is grounding the brief in some sort of visual inspiration as well, which can be very, very helpful with the client to make sure you guys are both on the same page and they're not thinking, oh, we're going to be totally minimalistic and futuristic. And you're like, oh, we're thinking of taking a completely kind of retro, archaic, approach to this thing. You're grounding the aesthetics in some sort of a reality that you both can agree to before you get into the deep, deep creative exploration where you spend a lot of time and a lot of money developing the creative. The more alignment you can get leading into it, the better. Okay, so that is it. Oh, sorry, my chat was not advancing. Fun, cheap stickers I've collected over time. Why not scan them first for archives? I'm not sure exactly what that means. I'm sorry about that. So Kylea says, we put on a Halloween themed cycling and running event. That's cool. Finish the ride and run. Also ready to do a lot of celebrating. That's very cool. So you guys, I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you haven't, please go to philipvandusen.com/bonfire. Bonfire is, the doors are open. I'm not sure how long the doors are going to remain open. It may be just a few weeks. So if you want to get in while the getting's good, go check out philipvandusen.com/bonfire. It's an amazing community of creative professionals who are in there growing and building their businesses. So for freelancers, if you are working with small clients, small to medium-sized businesses, you may not have been using a creative brief. And I guarantee you that if you start using this as a tool to capture the key components of your project, with your client and get sign off on this and interaction on this, your projects are going to go faster and smoother and have less friction and less pain for everybody. So I encourage you to check it out and try it. And if you are already doing creative briefs or have experience with them, looking at this single one-page creative brief might kind of open your eyes a little bit on how you make that jump from the 15-page book that your clients give you to something that an actual graphic designer can actually use and understand that can influence their design. I have found that the one-page creative brief was almost even more valuable to me, and one of the reasons why I developed in the first place was actually to take everything I knew and the client knew about the project, but put it into a digestible form that the rank and file of the creative studio could really internalize and understand. It could affect the work in a really positive way. So that's it. I hope you guys have an awesome and very safe Halloween. And I'm going to be going live in just a couple more days to do a live stream on how to start an email list from scratch. So if you've been thinking about developing an email list, and I highly encourage you to do that, it's the only place you can communicate with your audience and clients directly without having to jump through a bunch of social media hoops. Join me for that. It's going to be on Thursday, probably around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just like today. How to start an email list from absolute scratch. So come and check that out with me in just a couple days. I hope you all have a fantastic Halloween. And with that, I will see you next time. Bye, guys.